We're going to be in Matthew chapter 10 today, picking up where we left off last week. In the previous chapter, Jesus has just let his disciples know about a harvest that's ripe and ready for picking, but tells them that workers are needed. So in chapter 9, verse 37, he says, "Then he said to his disciples, 'The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest.'" Now, it's kind of funny to think about what's going on in our day and age right now, where you've got all these businesses out there that can't find workers, and we complain about it. You know, we see businesses being shut down, and why can't people just go out and do the work? Jesus is saying the same thing about us here. It's kind of stings a little bit when you see it, and this is extremely important work. The harvest he's talking about refers to people who need to hear the gospel and respond to it. The workers refer to those willing to find those people and engage them with the good news of Christ. And what we find in most churches, and this isn't, I'm not picking on us, most churches, what you find are a bunch of well-fed Christians, and I'm not talking about, good eating, food-wise, but, constantly taking in Bible and spiritual nourishment, but they're never really doing anything with it. They're just kind of sitting and not getting involved. And there's some reasons for that, possibly. Maybe they're just too busy with other things. Maybe they think it's someone else's job. Maybe they lack the ability, or maybe they lack the courage, or maybe, and this one stings a little bit, maybe they just simply don't care that much. They don't want to be bothered with that kind of stuff. Well, as we're going to look at today, and as we're going to see in this passage, none of those reasons really hold up. And regardless of the reasons that we come up with, isn't it sad to think that Jesus has to put up help wanted signs in his churches to try to get people engaged in the work? So it's kind of funny what he does with the disciples. I don't know if you kind of saw this or not, but in chapter 9, he says, "Hey guys, the workers are few. Pray to the Lord of the harvest that he'll send workers." So he tells them to pray for it. And then in chapter 9, he comes in and goes, "Hey guys, look, God answered your prayer. You're the workers." See how he set them up with that? It's pretty good, pretty smart. So now the disciples are actually going to be the ones that go out and start doing the work. So Jesus is going to commission them, he's going to prepare them, and then he's going to send them out. And hopefully, this sounds like a fairly familiar concept to you. Who knows what our mission statement is at the door? It's 3 simple words. It's right there, guys. That was an easy test. Come on. Yeah. Making, equipping, and sending. And the reason we chose that is we believe it captures the heart of what Jesus is doing here in this passage. Some people call this the first commission, but it also captures the heart of what Jesus is doing in the Great Commission, which we read already this morning. And those are things we should all know, because they're literally our marching orders. I don't know if you realize that or not, but as a Christian, did you know that you had marching orders from Jesus himself? And we read it this morning. I'm going to read it again. "Jesus came and said to them, 'All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you, and behold, I am with you always to the end of the age.'" This commission given by Jesus is the reason that we as Christians are still here on earth. I don't know if you realize that, but contrary to popular belief, we're not here to pursue the American dream or to live our best life now. This is what a lot of Christians think we're supposed to be doing here. If that's the case, I would just say, "Lord, beam me up right now. Don't wait. Just take me home, because that's where my best life is. I want to be with Jesus. If that's what I'm here to do is try to find happiness here, I'd rather go there now. That's not why we're here. He left us here because there are still people who don't know the way of salvation, and they don't know the hope that comes through knowing Jesus. And we've been given the task or the privilege really even, of letting them know about that, which is something we won't be able to do once we get to heaven. And the time for that will be over and done with. So we should feel a real sense of urgency, because 1, the time is short, and 2, eternity, heaven, hell, they're real. And people are going to end up in one of those places, and it should matter to us where they end up more than anything else. Most of us say we believe that hell is real, but we don't act like we do. I mean, I'm just guilty of that. Functionally, I really don't act like I believe it's real or that people are going to go there. If I did, I would definitely be motivated to a lot more action. And that's what Jesus is doing in this passage, is he's calling us to action, which is kind of cool. And the great news is he's not just saying, hey, go do this. He's actually willing to step in and help us and equip us and empower us to do it. So with that in mind, we're going to jump into our passage in Matthew 10:1. And it says this: "And he called to him his 12 disciples, and he gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal every disease and every affliction. The names of the 12 apostles are these: first, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, James the son of Zebedee and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James the son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, Simon the zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him." It's funny to think that, this is the group that Jesus assembled, this group of 12. These are names that nobody probably knew before this, and yet 2,000 years later, we've heard all these names. We still talk about these guys and what they've done. The effects of what they've done still are rippling out today, and we're still, what they spearheaded is still growing. Verse 5 says this: "These 12 Jesus sent out, instructing them, 'Go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but rather go to the lost sheep of Israel.'" Now, this sounds probably a little bit funny, a little weird, this exclusivity of, hey, make sure you don't go anywhere near the Gentiles or the Samaritans, only go to the Jews. Especially since we just read the Great Commission, which says, hey, go into all the world, right? So what's going on here? Well, we need to understand that prior to Israel's rejection of Jesus, it was always this way. It was always Jew first, then Gentile. That was normal. And the other thing we need to keep in mind is not only was this really was just a short-term mission, if you want to think of it that way. I don't know if you've ever been on a short-term mission, but Jesus is sending them out for a specific time to a specific people with a specific message. And that message we find in verse 7. He says, "And proclaim as you go, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse lepers, cast out demons. You received without pain, give without pain." A couple of comments to make here. First, this is the same message Jesus has been giving the whole time he's been out and about, is the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Well, what does that mean? It's a clear statement that the Messiah has come. That's what he's telling them. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. And the reason he can say that is because Jesus is at hand. If Jesus is there, the kingdom's there. That's the way it works. Now, that's a pretty big claim to make, right? You can imagine him walking around saying, hey, the kingdom of heaven is at hand, everybody. I'm here. It's a bold statement. It would be very normal for somebody to say, oh, yeah, prove it. And that's exactly what Jesus and the apostles do. By all that, think about all the miracles that they did. When you see all these people getting healed, lepers cleansed, people being raised from the dead, people, demons being cast out, that's a way to authenticate this claim that Jesus is making. And not only does he do that, but also his disciples do it as well. So this is an extremely convincing proof that Jesus is who he says he was. He's the real deal. He adds an interesting note to the end of verse 8 by reminding them that everything Jesus has done, everything he's given them, came free of charge, and therefore should be done for others or given to others free of charge. Kind of sad that this statement even needs to be made, but you got to keep in mind they had a guy named Judas running around with them at this time, and if I'm being honest, I have a little Judas in me as well. I mean, if God gave you the ability and the power to go out and do these things, heal people, cleanse them, raise the dead, at some point it's going to enter your mind, hey, there's probably a little bit of money to be made in this. Oh, you want to be cleansed from leprosy? How much do you want to be? Yeah, makes sense. That would be wrong, by the way. And there's a lot of, because again, Jesus is given freely you have received, freely give, that's the idea. There are a lot of word faith preachers that should take a real hard look at this verse and think about what their whole ministry is about, because it's kind of disgusting, it's kind of despicable. And someday they're going to have to stand before Jesus, who freely gave them the ability to do anything, and answer for it. And that's kind of a terrifying thing to think about. So we should never profit from the name of Jesus Christ in a way where we're making money from his name. It's a despicable thing. The next verse also has been misunderstood over the years. Verse 9 says this, as he's sending them out, he says, "Acquire no gold or silver or copper for your belts, no bag for your journey, or 2 tunics or sandals or a staff, for the laborer deserves his food." Now, there have been people over the years who've interpreted this verse to mean that possessions are bad for the Christian, and if you don't head out on mission with just the clothes on your back, you kind of lack faith, and you're not really trusting God, and therefore your ministry won't be effective. That's kind of a silly thing to do. I knew a family that did this one time. They had kids. They bought a one-way ticket to some country they'd never heard of, showed up there with no plan in place. It was kind of funny, and it worked out. They didn't die or anything, but it wasn't the best plan. The point Jesus is making is not to be, somewhat prepared or think things through. It's just not to stockpile everything that you think you might need before you go. And so it's kind of like when I pack for a trip. I remember I'll be standing in my room and I'm thinking about, okay, where we're going. Okay, well, what if it's cold? I'm going to need some, what if it's hot? Are we going to get in the water at any point? Do I have to dress up? What kind of mood am I going to be? You start, pretty soon you're thinking, it's like, I need to, maybe, do these pants look okay? You start, pretty soon you've got 3 suitcases full of stuff for a 2-day trip, right? And all that's going to do is weigh you down and slow you down. And I see the same thing happen with church plants. I just ran into a guy recently that they want to start another church in Bend, which, again, it's a popular place to church plant. But he was telling me that it's going to be, they started about a year ago, and it's going to be next September before they actually plant, because they're trying to get everything possible in order before they start this, get all their ducks in a row, the best technology, the best music possible, all the programs for the kids, everything in place. And it's kind of the idea is if you build it, they will come. And so they're sitting there doing nothing for 2 years as they try to prepare for this. And again, preparing's not a bad thing, but what if we're just overcomplicating it a little bit? What if it's more of a see who comes and then let God build it out from there? And that's exactly what we did 11 years ago when we started the church. And in fairness, I'll be honest and say we didn't exactly know what we were doing, but it worked out really good. So we basically just waited for God and said, okay, well, we're going to start meeting in a home, and then we'll see what happens. Well, pretty soon got pretty full in the home. Okay, now what do we do? Well, let's look for a place. We found a place. We could afford it. We got into that place, and then we started brainstorming again. Okay, what else might we do? We tried to stay a couple of steps behind God the whole way and watched him naturally grow it organically in a way. Even the cool thing is every time we needed something, if we needed money, money showed up. If we needed people, that person showed up. One time we even got a commercial espresso machine given to us. We wanted to open a coffee shop in this place we were at. It was a great way for us to interact with the community. And we were thinking that would be so cool, but maybe this is a dumb idea. Maybe we shouldn't be doing this at all. But we really felt like God had put it on our heart. So we were meeting with this pastor. We were talking to him about where we were at and what we were doing. And he goes, we were getting ready to leave. And he goes, hey, I don't know if this would be helpful to you guys, but we've got a commercial espresso machine in the back room that we're not using anymore. Could you guys put it to use? And it's like, okay, that, we couldn't afford a $5,000 espresso machine. And at the right time, again, even that showed up. It's just neat the way it works. But if we would have waited until we acquired everything we needed to be successful, we'd probably still be waiting, honestly. At the end of the day, we need to trust Jesus to supply what we need, when we need it, and not try to plan everything out in case of emergency, because it'll just paralyze you. And I'm pretty good at that, so I know exactly what I'm talking about. Verse 10, that's why I have David next to me, and Chad. These guys have faith that I don't have. So David's the guy that jumps out of the airplane, and then I'm like, parachute? You want maybe have that? So it's neat how he brings the team together that way. Verse 10 ends with Jesus saying something else that's very interesting. He says, the reason we're not supposed to take a bunch of stuff with us is because the laborer deserves his food. It's kind of an odd thing to throw in there. But it tells us a couple things. One, it tells us that Jesus considers what the disciples are about to do as actual labor, real work. Well, what kind of work is this? Well, it's kingdom work. That's what it is. And it matters. But who's going to pay them for what they're doing? And the answer is kingdom people. And we see this in verse 11. This is how churches still exist today. This is how missionaries are able to go and do what they do, because they're doing kingdom work, but it needs to be supplied by kingdom people. So in verse 11, it says, in whatever town or village you enter, find out who is worthy in it and stay there until you depart. So the idea was they would go into town, they would ask questions. Hey, are there any people here that you think would help us out? The Smith family, they're always talking about the kingdom of God and the hope of the Messiah and this kind of thing. It's like, okay, go check that house out, knock on the door. And then they would let them in and let them stay and supply their food and their board, room and board, all that kind of stuff would have been really important on this journey. The word worthy tripped me up for a while. It was like, find somebody worthy. and go stay with them. And I kept thinking, well, that can't be right because you're not going to find anybody at that point. So it doesn't really mean like somebody who's worthy of me or worthy of the message that I'm bringing. That would be a silly thing. Can you imagine doing that? Knocking on the door and being like, let me take a look around the house for a minute. What kind of thread count are we talking about on the sheets? Show me your pillows. I'd like to see the bathroom. What menu do you have planned for me while I stay? That would be ridiculous. That's not what they're talking about. The idea here is that when they arrive in town, they want to find somebody who's going to be receptive to them and receptive to their message. Receptive might be a better word than worthy here. And in fact, verse 12 makes it clear that the way they're going to treat the people who receive them and the way they're going to treat people who don't receive them. So verse 12, it says, as you enter the house, greet it, and if the house is worthy or receptive, let your peace come upon it. But if it is not worthy, let your peace return to you. And if anyone will not receive you or listen to your words, shake off the dust from your feet when you leave that house or town. It's kind of a funny saying right there. It's like, shake off the dust from your feet. That was a common idiom that they used in that day, but it probably doesn't mean much to us today. It's kind of like when we talk about raining cats and dogs. People look at you like, what do you do? Well, this would have meant something to them. But when I hear that, shaking the dust off your feet, it sounds like a cool dance move or something like that. Man, I went out to the club the other night, and I was shaking the dust off my feet. All the cool kids are doing it. You put your right foot in, you shake it all about. It's not what they're talking about. It really just means wash your hands of it. So if you go somewhere and they won't receive you, wash your hands of it. You can walk away from that with a clear conscience that you did everything God asked you to do, and now you can walk away without regret with a clear conscience. And you know how relieving this is to know? God has asked us to share the gospel. He hasn't asked us to make anybody believe. And I think we get that confused. I wish I could make people believe. I would start, with someone. I got a couple kids in mind right now that I would just hold down and make them cry uncle if I could do that, but I can't. God has asked me to sow seeds. So the cool thing is, when we share the gospel, it's a win, no matter what happens next. Do you know that? That's all you've been asked to do, share the gospel. He'll take care of what happens from there. He's just asked you to do that. And if you do that, you can shake the dust from your feet and move on and let God deal with what happens next. He's pleased when we just do the sowing. Verse 15 tells us something pretty alarming about those who reject the message, though. It says, truly I say to you, it will be more bearable on the day of judgment for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah than for that town. And when you think about Sodom and Gomorrah and what happened there, and the judgment and the sin that took place, we always think, well, that's a town that fully deserved God's judgment, and that's a town that maybe shouldn't be forgiven. But Jesus is saying that rejecting Him is far worse, and we need to think that through. That's the only sin that really won't be forgiven is the rejection of Jesus Christ. The bottom line is this: there will be people who will receive us and be excited about our message, and there will be people that will reject us and will hate us and our message, and probably more of those will be about. But how great is it when they receive it? If you've ever led somebody to the Lord, if you've ever watched somebody bow in faith and receive Christ as their Lord and Savior and be a part of something like that, there's nothing greater than that. So that's kind of the passage, but let's look at some takeaways from what we've read about today, because a lot of that was specific to the disciples, but some of this stuff we can kind of get some takeaways from. So the first thing I would ask you to consider is this: does God call the equipped, or does He equip the called? There's a difference in the two. I would venture to guess that most of us don't feel particularly equipped to engage people with the gospel or to provide answers. Most of us don't feel prepared to answer those questions or deal with those objections. And I'm sure the disciples felt this way too. And think about this mission they're about to go on. It would have been slightly exciting and slightly terrifying, right? Because I don't know if you understand what's going on here, but Jesus has literally just done all the things. They've been watching Him do all these things for quite a while now, healing, doing all this stuff, and now He's sending them out to do the same things. But here's the big difference: He's not going to be with them, right? He's sending them out without Him. So that would be kind of like hanging out with Superman for a year, watching him outrunning bullets and stopping locomotives with his bare hands and leaping over tall buildings in a single bound. And then he looks at you and says, hey, now it's your turn to go out and save the world. I was like, there's a big problem with that, right? I'm not Superman. And I could see the disciples saying, wait a second, you're God. And now you're asking us to go out and do the things that God can do, right? Jesus is the superhero. We're just men. And it's even more sobering when you think about who these guys were, because they were kind of the opposite of impressive, for being honest. And, they weren't intellectuals. They weren't theologians. They weren't particularly skilled in any of the stuff that Jesus was asking them to go out and do. And that's how I think most of us feel when we think about getting involved in kingdom work. I am not a courageous person. I've never been described as adventurous or a thrill seeker. I'm pretty much the opposite of that. The thought of doing something like this, if I'm being honest, makes me want to puke and run away and hide. That's just, even getting up here and talking in front of people, it's not something, it doesn't make any sense that I'm doing this, if you know who I am. My friends and my family will happily confirm this. They make fun of me quite a bit. We have this thing they lovingly refer to as Brent going into full panic mode. And that can happen by going through a drive-through with a complicated order. And I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating for the sake of effect. That's literally happened. We had 5 kids, when we were growing up. And if that list wasn't written out in plain English for me to stop and read when we got there, it's, bad things are happening in my heart and my mind. And I don't like that. And it's just, I'm that way. So if Jesus were to approach me with something like this, I would highly encourage him to find somebody else. Right? It kind of reminds me of Moses when God approached him at the burning bush. I don't know if you remember this story, but imagine being Moses for a minute. Remember, he had fled from Egypt because he was wanted for murder. He'd been living pretty much a very boring existence in kind of, his own witness protection program out in the desert for 40 years. And he's just out there standing in the desert, one day, and a bush starts burning, and it's God there to talk to him. And he tells him this, hey, I want you to go back to the scene of the crime, Egypt. I want you to confront Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world right now. And I want you to tell him to let the Israelites go, or else. Keeping in mind that the Israelites were Pharaoh's forced slave labor. They were the ones doing all the work in Egypt, right? I could just picture Moses going, that sounds like a very exciting adventure for me to go on. Thank you so much for that. That's what I would be doing. I can completely understand the way Moses responds to God's request, because he does everything he can to try to get out of it. He gives God several excuses. He gives it a good college try, as they would say. And I want you to listen to these excuses and see if any of them might sound familiar to any of you guys, because I bet they might. Excuse number 1, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the children of Egypt, or the children of Israel out of Egypt? So the first thing he says, he puts down the card of, I'm a nobody, right? I'm not impressive. Who am I that you would call on me? Excuse number 2, what shall I say to them? Right? Again, I'm not going to know what to say. I'm not going to have the right words. As the famous dinosaur once said, I don't like confrontation. That's exactly what I would be saying here. Toy Story. If you're old and you don't have kids, you probably haven't seen it, but it's good. Excuse number 3, he says, suppose they will not believe me or listen to my voice. Again, he's saying, I'm not convincing. Why would anybody take me seriously? Why would anybody heed my words? Excuse number 4, oh my Lord, I am not eloquent, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. Right? Again, I'm the last person you would want representing you as your spokesperson. And then number 5 is my favorite. Oh Lord, please send someone else to do it. That's it. You got the wrong guy. There's got to be a better candidate out there. Please don't pick me. I told you it would sound familiar, right? These are the same excuses we all make. In fact, I was laughing about it because every week we ask a different guy in the church here and at the other location to lead the sharing time. And these are the excuses they give almost every time. And we've heard every one of these. Like, I can't get up in front of people and talk. I'm slow of speech. I'm not eloquent. These are the same things. And we're talking about walking up here and leading sharing time, not walking in front of Pharaoh and saying, let my people go. Big difference, right? But we still, same excuses. Now let me ask you this. On like a scale from 1 to 10, how'd Moses do? That's a pretty solid 10, I'd say, right? Was he the right man for the job? Yeah. Did he have the right words to speak at the right time? Yep. Did they listen to him? And did the Israelites follow him out of Egypt? They did. Yeah. Did Moses accomplish the work God asked him to do? Yes. So, this is what we conclude then. He can use unworthy, unwilling, and unskilled people to do impossible things. We're still talking about Moses 3,500 years later. Think about that. Everybody knows who Moses is. How is that possible? How can someone so ineffective be so effective? And that brings us to the next big point. Jesus delights in using the unusable. And this is really good news, isn't it? Because I'm one of those people. I'm unusable. And Jesus delights in using the unusable. It's funny. He doesn't even want to use the best of the best or the cream of the crop. He wants people who will be completely dependent on him and his power, people who know they can't do it in their own strength. His strength is made perfect in weakness, and that's the reality. So that means that God's dream team looks totally different than the world's dream team. I don't know if you remember the 1992 Olympics, but they actually put together what we call the dream team. It was pro basketball players that you didn't put pros in the Olympics, but they sent this team over to compete from America. And it was ridiculous. Even the people on the team, you don't even need to say their full name. You can just say Michael, Magic, Larry, Clyde, John Stockton. That's two names. Malone. I mean, these guys annihilated everybody they played. The average score was like 50 points more than the other team. That was the average. It wasn't even close. It was ridiculous. When they stood on the podium to receive their gold medals, who got the credit for what they did? They did. It was their strength, it was their skill, it was their ability. What Jesus is doing is completely different than that, and it's intentional. And I don't mean to be offensive here, but it's almost like Jesus shows up to the Olympics like with a special Olympics team of basketball players and says, here's my team. This is who I'm entering into the competition. And I know that's not a self-esteem builder, but that's the thing. Here's my team, and guess what? He wins. Who gets credit for that? Jesus gets credit for it, not us. It's his skill, it's his strength, it's his ability, and it's obvious to everybody at that point, and that's the way it's supposed to be. In fact, this is exactly what the Bible tells us in 1 Corinthians 1:26. Again, not a self-esteem builder, but a tremendous confidence builder when you understand this. It says, not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called, but God has chosen the foolish things of the world to put to shame the wise, and God has chosen the weak things of the world to put to shame the things that are mighty. And he goes on to talk about the base things and the things that are not. And the reason is given so that no flesh will glory in his presence. And I love this. God will not share his glory with anyone, and he shouldn't. He's amazing. And the fact that he, if we win a gold medal or a gold crown, what we're going to do with that is throw it at his feet because he's the one who deserves it. He's the one who gets the credit. And what a privilege it will be to do that someday. And this is why, Moses was able to do what he did. It was God's power on display. It was God's words flowing through him. It was God's ability coming through. Moses wasn't a great man. He didn't even want to go, right? He was able to do what he did because of God. And you and I, his apostles, are going to be able to do what they do because of him. And you and I, when we join into this work, will be able to do amazing things because it's his power coming through us. Matthew's already established that Jesus has complete authority over everything. Disease, disability, demons, death. And it says that he's given us his authority. That's amazing to think about. He gives us that authority to go out and do things that we shouldn't be able to do. And this is kind of the amazing part in all of this, is that Jesus wants to involve us. I don't know if you ever think about that. He doesn't need us. I mean, why would he need any of us? He does just fine on his own. It's kind of like when you have the bring your kid to work day, when a dad gets to bring his kid to work. And I remember I heard a pastor talking about this one time. The kid doesn't know what he's doing. Right? He's just over there clanking on the keyboard, or maybe he's got a hammer and a board over in the corner, and he's just, he's working with dad, and he's having a great time. It's like he's not doing much of anything, but he's, it's important. God wants to bring his kids to work. He wants to have us join him in what he's doing. Not because he needs us, not because we're going to be especially effective on our own, but because he loves us, and he loves spending time with us, and he wants to involve us in it. And the crazy thing is, it's like most of us don't want to do it. Can you imagine being a dad and saying, hey, it's bring your son to work day. Do you want to come with me? Nah. Like, what? That would be horrifying as a dad. But the workers are few. We've already been told that. We get to help spread the fame of our great God who's done so much for us. We get to help spread his fame throughout the world. We get to let people know that the kingdom of heaven is at hand, that God's future reign has broken through into this world right now, and it's available to people. There's really no reason for us not to get involved. If you're a Christian, Jesus has done all the heavy lifting for us. These things are true if you're a Christian. He's called you, or he's commissioned you. We know that. He sent you, right? He said, go. So he's also instructed you with your marching orders. We already talked about that. Go make disciples. He will equip you for everything you need when the time comes. The words you need will come. Have you ever been in a situation like that where you're talking to somebody and you don't know what to say and you just throw up a quick prayer, Lord, help me, and all of a sudden words start flowing out of your mouth and you sound like a pretty intelligent person all of a sudden? It's like scriptures are coming into your mind and you're answering their questions, and that's him. He's equipping you. And he'll do that with the skill you need, the money you need, the strategy, all of this stuff, because you have Jesus. Like the way to be effective with Jesus is have Jesus. That's it. He's given us authority as well. And I love this. His message, it's not our message, it's his message. And his message contains authority already. So Jesus has done everything necessary for us to get involved. The big question is, do we want to get involved? John Piper once said something that really irritated me, but it stuck with me. It stung when I heard it, but the more I reflected on it, the more truth I found in it. He said, when it comes to getting involved in the Great Commission, there are three kinds of Christians: those who go, those who send, and those who are disobedient. It's like, I told you it would sting. The people that just don't do anything. Not everyone's going to go overseas, join the mission field. Not everybody's going to be able to engage people on a consistent basis, here in town and so forth, but everyone can still be involved in the mission. In our passage today, we saw the importance of the people that provided room and board for the disciples. That was an important part of the mission. There were the goers and the givers. Both of those were important. Matthew's account doesn't mention it, but in the other two accounts, it says that Jesus sent them out 2 by 2. So they used the buddy system. And this is super important as well, because it's way easier to do something with somebody else than it is by yourself. I used to fix copiers for a living, and I had a coworker that he would always, whenever there was a real difficult copier or to fix, or maybe a real difficult customer, he'd always be like, hey, you want to come with me? And his theory was misery loves company, which I'm not saying that evangelizing is misery, but kind of sometimes it's hard to do, right? But it was always way more fun when we go together. It wasn't near as hard because you had your buddy with you. I don't know if you've ever gone door to door. It's terrifying. We did this once in Bible college. It was an assignment, actually. That's why I did it. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have gone. But they sent us out together. And by myself, it would have been terrible. But me and my buddy John, his name is John Tom. I don't know why, but it sounds like an Indian name, but John Tom. We go to the first door, and the church was called the First Evangelical Free Church. That was the one we were helping. It's a mouthful. So we knock on the door, and this old lady opens the door, and she's just disheveled. Her shirt's buttoned wrong. She just looks grumpy, and he starts talking, and he says, hi, my name's John Tom. This is Brent. We're from the First Evangelical Free Church. He starts just rambling stuff, and he finally finishes, and she looks at him, and she goes, I didn't understand a word you just said. And he laughed, and he goes, I didn't either. And we laughed the rest of the day about it. Now, she didn't fall on her knees and say, what must I do to be saved? But it was way more fun doing something like that with somebody than without. Being part of the buddy system might mean that you're the one who pays. It might mean that you're the one who prays. It might mean that you're the one who encourages. All of those things are necessary, because there's people who are better at mission sometimes than we are. But all of these things are important. And knowing that we aren't in this alone, but that we have each other's backs in this, makes all the difference in the world. We have a guy that calls us, or texts us, nobody calls anymore, every Monday morning, just about, and just says, appreciate you guys, praying for you, thank you for the work that you do. He's our buddy, my buddy. We just get encouragement from him every week to keep on keeping on, and it matters. So the question was, do you want to get involved? If the answer is yes, I want to get involved. The first step is something we looked at last week. Pastor David talked about this. The first step is we must have compassion for the people around us who don't know Jesus yet and who are not recipients of his grace. Compassion will compel us to mission. if we understand where they're going without Christ, it will motivate us to do something. So, and if you don't have compassion for people, start asking God to give it to you. Start asking God to change your heart, and He will. And then the second important step, which I just kind of mentioned, is prayer. Just pray. Pray that God will give you ability. Pray that He'll give you opportunity. Pray that you'll be one of those workers. And then the third big step is just trust Him. Trust Him with what comes next. Step out in faith and see what happens. I love that He said He'll be with us till the end of the age. That's it's a comfort. Even with the disciples, He didn't go with them, but He did. And with us, He's given us the Spirit. He's with us till the end of the age. Even Moses, when Moses died, God was with him. He said He'd be with him. He had a replacement waiting in the wings, Joshua, ready to go, still with him. And he even told him this in Joshua 1:9. He said, have I not commanded, and actually the word commissioned could be used here, have I not commissioned you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened. Do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And this is important because next week we're going to look at the difficulties of actually going out and doing some of these things. Taking up your cross, denying yourself, pouring your life out for Jesus is definitely narrow road kind of stuff. It's difficult. But you know what? It's the most satisfying, fulfilling, life-giving thing you can possibly do. That's where true life exists. Doesn't make sense, but it does. There's an old quote by Jim Elliot. It says, he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. And I love that. It's not stupid for us to give up our lives here and now for the one that awaits us later. And I'm going to close with this story. I saved it for the end because it's going to be hard for me to get through. It was strategic. I'm a crier, and this gets me because I'm a dad with 3 daughters, and this story just inspired me and broke my heart at the same time. It's a story about a guy named Adoniram Judson and his wife Anne. I found it in David Platt's commentary to give him credit for it. A little more than 200 years ago, God put it upon Adoniram Judson's heart to go to Burma. It was an unreached people group, India area, to let them know about Jesus. But he didn't want to go alone. He wanted to take a woman that he'd fallen in love with named Anne with him. But before he could take Anne with him, he had to marry her. And before he could marry her, he had to ask her dad for permission to have her hand in marriage. So he wrote her dad a letter. This is a tough one. I'll just warn you now. I got the tissues here. All right. This is what it said. I have to ask whether you can consent if you can consent to part with your daughter early next spring to see her no more in this world. Whether you can consent to her departure and her subjection to hardships and sufferings of missionary life. Whether you can consent to her exposure to the dangers of the ocean, to the fatal influence of the southern climate of India, to every kind of want and distress, to degradation, insult, persecution, and perhaps a violent death. You imagine being a dad reading that? Like, what? It goes on. Can you consent to all of this for the sake of him who left his heavenly home and died for her and for you? For the sake of perishing immortal souls, for the sake of Zion and for the glory of God? Can you consent to all of this in hope of soon meeting your daughter in the world of glory with a crown of righteousness brightening her head, basically, because of the work that she's done and seeing these people come to know Christ? And Anne's dad said yes. I can't imagine saying yes to that, basically. And he never saw his daughter again, and he never saw his son again this side of heaven. But the amazing thing, Anne actually lost her life sharing the gospel with the people who'd never heard of Jesus. But as a result of the Judsons going and doing this, there are over 4,000 churches there today and over 500,000 followers of Christ in the heart of a Buddhist nation. It just blows my mind to think about that. What kind of faith it would take to do that. What kind of faith it would take for a dad to say yes to that. But the impact that it had, the fact that God used them so mightily the way he did, inspires me to know that he can use us as well if we're willing to do it. So, Father, thank you so much that we have stories like these, that we have stories of Moses, stories of the apostles. These all seem like mighty and courageous people to us, and makes us feel like maybe we that there's something different than what we are. But through your Holy Spirit, we know that you can empower us to mission. And so I just pray, Lord, that The workers are few. I pray that you would inspire us, that you would help us to be engaged and want to be involved. Pray that you would give us more opportunity to do the work and that you would give us more people to share with, Lord. May 2023 be a year where we just see many people come to Christ in this church, and we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.